Hey everybody, I want to welcome you back to Beautiful, Fearless, and Free. My name is Haley. I want to thank you for subscribing to the channel, for liking the previous videos that I've posted. If you haven't checked out the other videos, definitely do that after you watch this one. Today we are going to have a very exciting video. We've got a panel discussion that's going to happen. And so I just hope that you sit back, that you enjoy, you relax, and that you take something away from this. All right, so we are going to start off our panel discussion. I'm going to introduce everybody that is here. In terms of university and being that university age, I know that we came from a more sheltered family and we weren't allowed to go out to parties in high school. We weren't allowed to drink. We weren't allowed to, smoke and sleep around. That's pretty normal for most teens, but I know my friends were doing it. I know that my siblings' friends were doing it and whatnot. And so that was high school. But then once we got to university, for me personally, in my experience, I was like, yo, let's shots. Like, that's how I felt in university. Like, mom and dad are not there. Church is far away. Like, church is far removed. Like my sister and I, we used to party every weekend. And then I would be at church leading worship on the Sunday morning, right after I was hammed on a Saturday night, or after I was, just out at a club somewhere that I really shouldn't have been in. It was just kind of like, I know what I believe, I know who I am, but I felt this huge pull to just like go and just do stuff that all my friends were doing. And it was like, my friends were like, why can't you come out? What's wrong with that? Like, we're 19, we're 18, we're 20, and we're partying. Like, let's go out. But then I'm like, well, I have to be teaching Sunday school on Sunday, and I have to be like at doing stuff with youth and on worship. And I loved that because that is who I am. But I felt this huge like draw to just go this way. And then when I did, it was so much worse. It really was so much worse. And you get tangled up with different people and things start happening. And then it's like you're trying to run back to church, but you feel so awkward because you've been living this double life, really. So, I just found that really happened for me in university and at the university age. So can you guys speak to that? Or what would you say to somebody who's maybe in grade 12 and is like, yeah, I'm ready to just go, and maybe they didn't have that solid, foundation in their family, or maybe they did. Maybe they grew up in a Christian home and their beliefs and their morals and whatnot are there, but they're just struggling. So yeah, I'll open up the floor.
I hit 18. At 19, I moved to Regina on my own and kind of went a little crazy because I had my first taste of freedom. I'd never drank alcohol before, never had sex, nothing. And it was very interesting. I was excited, but I was also terrified. Terrified because I could hear in the back of my head, my mom, mostly her voice saying, if you have sex, you're going to hell. If you have, for marriage, or, you have sex for marriage, you're going to hell. If you drink alcohol, you're going to become an alcoholic and you're going to have no future. I know I dramatized it a bit, but that was in the back of my head. Even my youth leaders saying, if you touch if you guys hold hands, it's going to lead to sex. So you don't want to push the boundaries. And so it was like coming out of what I felt like was very, very just a controlling environment to complete freedom. And I kind of just, probably in the eyes of what goes on now, it wasn't that wild, but in my mind it was wild. So going out, I would not not get hammered, but I would definitely be out drinking, going to the bar, and, you know, started sleeping with my boyfriend, and it was all, and lying to my parents. I eventually, and then I started teaching at the Christian school and started going to, you know, I was going back to church because it was like Haley said, I was living a double life. I wanted to be a Christian, but I also knew I didn't know who I was. I had no identity, and I was trying to find that. And everybody else around me was doing these things and having a blast, and I wanted to have fun too. So there had to be some draw to this. And even though I knew everyone said, no, it's evil, it's awful, it'll lead you down a terrible path, I just couldn't believe, I guess, that it could be that bad. And I felt like, no, I can keep control of this and not let it get out of hand. Well, it started getting out of hand for sure, to the point where I started having issues with anxiety. I started having panic attacks. I started shaking, throwing up. I couldn't even leave my house because I was so conflicted with this double life I was living. I couldn't live like the world and yet live for God at the same time. And I had to make a huge decision. What was it gonna do? Because I couldn't do both anymore. And God really visited me at that time. I was 20, 21, and but it took a lot of work. I had to do a lot of praying. I had to do a lot of soul searching. I had to do a lot of talking, finding, seeking people that would build me up. And I think as a young adult, that's one of the hardest things, is find someone who can mentor you. Because I think you feel like nobody else cares about what you're going through, and no one's ever gone through what you're going through, but it isn't true. And I think that's the challenge to us as older, well, not that we're old, but not young adults anymore, is that we need to be, and we are doing this right now. That's why this is so great. I think that she's doing this channel, is encouraging people, that younger girls that are going through these things, you're not alone. And I just encourage you to go seek out a mentor, because in those times when I was sitting in that, you know, apartment crying out to God, it was very lonely. And I think that, you know, also, I think the loneliness is kind of what pushes you to do these things too, because you feel isolated by not going out to party, not doing what everyone else is doing. So it's easier to just go along than being at home alone, not having any friends, and not, feeling excluded. So that was.
So I can count on my one hand how many times I went to the bar or like when drinking, but like I was super lonely in university. And when I did do anything that I knew my parents would approve of, I had a huge shame cycle that would come out, and I felt shame over any decision I would make. And which I'm like, that's not from God. But it's interesting how it's like, no matter what you do, you're stuck in a situation, right? It's like in university, if you go to the parties, it feels like, you know, it's one thing, and then if you don't, there's a different thing that happens, and it's like, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. And like, I was lonely and I wanted that and all that stuff, but because I didn't want to let my parents down, I'm like, man, that's a different issue altogether. But like, I really just value them so much, and I couldn't. And so I didn't, and I just like that, but the shame cycle for me when I did do something that I knew my parents wouldn't approve of, though I was an adult and I can make my own choices, that's what really brought me down to a place where it wasn't good, it wasn't healthy, it was, you know, guilt eating me alive. And that has taken like years and time for me to be like, that is not Christianity, that is not God, that is not how like Jesus dying on the cross works, right? Like, we're not supposed to feel shame. And so I think for girls going to university, or that's a struggle, like if you do mess up, I guess I want to say there's grace for everything. And if you choose not to go to parties and you choose not to, but you do one night or you do something that's wrong, there's grace for every situation. And shame, like, tell somebody about it, I guess, is what I learned at university, because not sharing or not having, like you said, a mentor or someone to look up to or to teach you or to talk to, I think that's probably the hardest place to be.
I think that my university experience, coming from a family that was very strict, that looking back, I don't think that my parents were actually that strict. I just think they set ground rules that were actually reasonable. But at the time, I thought it was just completely controlling and unrealistic. So I think I would say that you're going to be faced with a lot of temptation when you go to university, because it is a time where you get to make every decision for yourself, and you're not really consulting anybody else, and it's really what you want to do. You don't have to tell your parents if you don't want to, because they're not there unless you live at home or you're still in the same city. But there's a lot of opportunity for you to kind of not have to disclose what you're doing like you would have to do if you're in high school or at another stage. And so I would say just be prepared that you will be tested. And for me, I wasn't really sound in my faith at the time when I was going to university, so I was just living a very worldly life, but it just felt lacking. It felt wrong. And you know that there's this voice in your head telling you, your conscience telling you that what you're doing, like, it doesn't sit well with you, but you just stifle it because like a lot of the other testimonies, that's what everybody else is doing. And it's a time where you're trying to find yourself and you really don't know who you are. So you're trying all of these different things. But I think one thing I would say is listen to yourself, because for me, I know that my conscience was constantly speaking to me, or what I now know as the Holy Spirit in me was talking to me and just telling me, like, you don't need to do this. You don't, that too. or family who was actually sound in their faith and just prospering in their faith, preaching to you and evangelizing to you. And I think living that worldly life, I didn't want to hear any of it. I just had no time for it. And I think that was the enemy just trying to kind of come in and take over, because they know the purpose of your life. Even now, like, we may not know, but they know, and they know that when they continue to just attack and attack and attack, it just completely turns your focus to something else, which is not what you're supposed to be focused on. And so I would say just listen to yourself, because there are things that will happen that you know. I don't know how to phrase this. There are things that will happen that you'll have to choose one or the other. And I think a lot of the time inside, you know which route you want to take, but because you feel pressured or because you feel uncertain, you tend to just turn a blind eye to that. And I would say, don't, like, evaluate that feeling. Don't just stifle it. Just think about it. Don't push it away, because it's probably the better decision to follow how you're actually feeling and when you're questioning things. And like other people have said, find someone who can mentor you. And that doesn't necessarily have to be your parents. It could be someone in your church. It could be someone who you meet at a Christian group on campus or something. But there are always people who are either going through the exact same thing you're going through, or something similar, or it may not even be them, but they might have had an interaction with somebody else who completely understands what you're going through. So don't hide it, and don't feel shame about whatever you're going through or whatever you may encounter.
I had always followed the rules all my life, living with my parents, and it was almost like they had shielded me from, like, the dangers of the world. They protected me. That's their job as parents, to protect and provide and make sure we grow. But for me, I felt completely unprepared going out to university on my own. I had never lived away from my family. I was the first of my siblings to be leaving. And I was excited, but at the same time, I wasn't able to go to the program that I wanted. That's a whole nother story. But in a sense, I felt like I was missing out on my calling or on my purpose by not doing that program. And so when I left for university, it was really like, well, I don't really know why I'm doing this program. I'm doing it because I need to go to university so I can get a good job. But I wasn't passionate about anything I was learning. I was like, well, I guess I could do this, because what else am I going to do? So when I left and had all of that freedom just all of a sudden right there. Yes, I had the skills to make good decisions. I knew what was right, what was wrong, but I'd never sort of had to police myself or to be tempted and say no. I always had mom and dad to be like, remember, and then they would enforce the rule. Whereas now it was like, well, you know you could do this and you know what's going to happen, or you could go explore everything else that's there. And so I took full advantage of exploring every aspect of life that I had not been able to explore while living with my parents. I will say one thing though, my group of friends that I got together with, they were solid. So I had a solid support system. But even having good friends didn't stop me from falling into a crowd of rough people. And so by the time I had gone a year and a half at university on my own, I'd been to the bars, I'd done the clubbing. I've never been one to do drugs, so I didn't go down that path. But at the same time, I'd had multiple boyfriends. I had met so many different people. On paper, my life looked great. I was an active part of a sorority. I held a position in the whole program and everything. I had my degree looked great. I had an internship on Capitol Hill. Like, I was living my best life, but inside I was dying. I didn't go to church. I didn't read a Bible the entire time I was there. I didn't pray at all. Like, I'd essentially left, not my faith, because I still believed in God, I believed in Jesus, but I'd left all of those, all of the supports that we have in our lives to sort of bring us closer to God. I'd left that all behind. As soon as I left home, I was like, this is part of my home life. I'm starting a new life at university, and this is the new me. And I ended up in an abusive relationship without even realizing it. Like, my mental health was such a struggle. And it wasn't even that I was trying to live a double life. I fully embraced the worldly way of living, but it just, nothing was working. Nothing was working. And it got to the point where I took time off of school. I'd taken the semester off, and I'd broken up with the boyfriend from the abusive relationship, got myself a little therapy cat. He was so cute. But it was like, my life still wasn't coming together. And it took me getting angry at God. And I remember this one night I was in my apartment and I was wrestling and tussling with my faith and with God. And at one point I just yelled out, I was like, this is not what you promised. Like, you said blah, 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 and blah, 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 blah. Like, you said you have a plan for me to prosper me. Does this look like I'm prospering, God? Because I don't feel it. And that same day, I called my parents in the morning and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. This isn't working. And that same day, God had removed me from that situation. He took me home, and within a month, I want to say, he had sent me out to my wilderness, which was Regina. I don't know how I ended up here. But since I literally said, if you think you can do better, God, do better. And I'm waiting. And he took up my challenge, took me out of the mess, and plopped me where I could prosper and where I was meant to be. And I honestly, that was what proved to me that God was real. Like, I always knew in the back of my mind he was real, but you've got to understand that as long as you're willing to go to him in your times of trouble, he will always protect and care for you and watch over you. And it took me hitting rock bottom to realize that all I needed to do was ask. All I needed to do was say something. So for those of you who struggle with the worldly part of university, I would say just go to him. Bring all of your issues, every struggle, every hard pass that you have to make. If you're struggling with a relationship, with a friendship, with a course, whatever it is, just go to him. And if you're willing to hear what he has to say, he'll set you straight.
But because no one in the church talks about it, and there's no females standing up and saying, hey, this is something I struggle in. And I think that is
start doing something to catch yourself and just apologize to those you hurt. And you're really going to, there's no one who can really.
In terms of lying, what we've been discussing, it really is just poisonous. And a lot of the time it stems from either being insecure about something or fear of something.